Pavlo, what a privilege and an honor to have you on the Heavy Chef Show. I've been following Aurik for some time, and you. This is the first time we've actually met in person, so it's really great to have you here in Cape Town and on the set.
Good, thank you.
Before we talk about your book, which I'm really fascinated by, and I've just had a cursory read of, I haven't gone into the hugest amount of detail.
A cursory read, Fred.
Your publisher sent it to me yesterday, so I consider myself a speed reader, but I'm not that fast. So I'm really loving it so far, and I'm loving the authenticity of it, which comes across very strongly. But I wanted to quickly just touch upon Aurik and the work that you do, and just if you could. I'm going to put you on the spot, but just to define Aurik and what it is that you do.
So we're a growth accelerator for established businesses, and we support the growth intentions behind the businesses. We look at building scale in the businesses, and we look at really getting a business to a point where of a day, should the business owner choose to, they have an asset as opposed to a job. In other words, they've created something that's saleable.
Sure.
And the reason that matters enormously is because and we were speaking a little bit earlier about Silicon Valley. We were speaking about the American economy, how well geared and structured it is for commercial opportunity.
Sure.
But in the US, 94.6% of businesses started failed to sell. And it should get every business owner thinking, well, what is my end game? Because there are only two options in an end game. The one is either a sale, and that's what we mostly hope for. And if it's not that, what is it? Statistically, it's going to be a closure.
Yeah, that's quite a scary thought, and obviously something that's prevalent in most of we entrepreneurs at the back of our minds. And I think you've had this extraordinary experience, and you've started a number of businesses, you've listed a few, you've had some failures as well, and all of this on this astonishing career trajectory. And I think what is interesting to me, and it came through in the book, is this kind of this framework that you've created, the Aurik way. And I mean, in a sense, I'd love to just quickly define that. If you're able to, in a short space of time, just talk about it. I mean, I think a lot of us are familiar with things like the Rockefeller habits and the E-myth and so on. And how does Aurik define this methodology in a South African sense, but I think also from a global sense?
Well, look, we're agnostic in terms of country and how we define it. And we define a business, we say that every single business should be built with only one intent in mind, and that's to build it into something called an asset of value. And an asset of value has a number of features to it. The first feature, the founding statement behind an asset of value, is what makes you special. And please don't say it's a product, because products no longer win any games in businesses today. We argue that what makes you special is having a very good understanding as to who you serve in your business, what problem you solve for them, and the experience you give them in interacting and working with you. And that forms the very first foundation building block of an asset of value.
Gotcha.
From there, we argue you need to build a system of delivery. And a system of delivery has two components to it. It creates sales momentum, so it's the activities of marketing, the activities of selling that are system driven and deliver the expectation for the kind of client that you're serving around what experience they might have in having their problem solved from you. Behind that, or following on from that, you need fulfillment. And Fred, that's all about operations. And in truth, if you think about where the brand of a business is built, it's built in the ability to deliver what you said you would deliver in the first instance. And when people have a good experience there, through the operational fulfillment process, your brand gets built through word of mouth, and it gets built and supported by people who become brand aficionados of your company. From there, what those elements do is they release you by being able to find a good team to run those operating systems. We talk about the right people doing the right thing at the right time. That then leaves you with time. And I'll put a question to you. In your business, who's the expert in your business? And what should you be doing mostly in your business? Surely it should be looking for next level growth. That means having access to funding, and having access to new opportunities and the ability to strike and do deals. If you're not released from the daily operations of your business, you have no time to do that. If you don't have a team that you can rely on to deliver it, you have no time or confidence to do that. And all of that puts you into the final element of an asset of value. It allows you to sit in a business where, when of a day I choose to buy you, you can articulate why the business is sellable, excluding you. In other words, it's an asset that stands separate to and from you. And if you can't get that argument right on that fateful day, I think you will find yourself as a 94.6%er.
Sure, that's amazing. It's quite brutally focused. I mean, that's amazing. So you talk about identity, you talk about the distribution, you talk about the experience with your customers, you talk about the fulfillment and operations, as you say, the word of mouth, the kind of sharing between people externally to your business, and then the building up of that team, and then ultimately all of that wrapping up into this asset of value, as you call it, which is an amazing framework, I guess. And I suppose it leads to working on the business and not in the business, right? For the entrepreneur, which that's the dream. Right?
It is the dream. And you know, I look around where we are located here, and in the background I see the harbor and I see boats and I see ships. And one of the big things that I certainly realized, and we write about it extensively in the book, is if you're the captain of the ship, the engine room sits below decks. And it's crucial that it works, Fred, because it keeps the propeller turning. In other words, it gives you momentum. But when you're below decks, you're not on the bridge. And the bridge of the ship is where you have the navigation equipment. It's where you have the dashboards. It's where you have an understanding of what resources you have available. It has a very, very clear defining instinct around how to get to where you want to get to in the most efficient way. If you don't spend time on the bridge and you spend time in the engine room, and then you come to me over there and say, hey, Pavlo, I'm looking for funding, and I see that without you there, the engine room doesn't churn and turn. Or without you there, the ship is going to go in a circle because there's no one directing it from the bridge.
Yeah.
It makes me nervous to fund you, and it makes it impossible for me to be confident around a buying decision to invest or buy the business from you.
Sure.
And we don't think about it because we're so in love with our products, and we're so in love with the idea of our business, and we're so in love with the service that we offer. Seldom do we actually take a bit of perspective and take a step back and say, but hang on, if it's not me in the business and I look at it from the outside, how viable is this business without me? And that's the big challenge.
Sure, and I suppose no investor wants to buy the captain, they want to buy the ship, right?
They want to buy the operating ship.
Yeah, and I get that, and I think, I mean, obviously there's a global perspective on that, and looking at, I mean, I suppose taking the captain analogy further, I mean, we've been through some pretty stormy weather, right? And a good captain is only a captain who's actually been through a few storms, and that's quite defining. How do you feel currently about, let's talk about South Africa in terms of our entrepreneurial ecosystem? How do you feel in terms of your unique perspective, investing, working with, sitting alongside these captains, and looking and having a real kind of unique view on the choppy waters that we're in at the moment?
Yeah, you know, Fred, I look at it really. So we do business in the US, we do business in the UK, we do business in the EU, we do business in South Africa. And all of them have got their problems, and all of them have got issues, and all of them have got bumpy, uncomfortable, warty bits to them. And the view that I adopt is, if you have clarity of purpose, which is one of the fundamental elements that I talk about in the book, it's one of the hardest things to get right. Yeah. If you have clarity of purpose and you allow that to guide your actions, and then you create a discipline that says, I will only pay attention to the things that I have an ability to enact and make happen. You then look at the environment of business over here, you will see the bumpy, choppy waters over here, which in the media are woefully about negative environments and why things can't happen and what's wrong. And you will look at it with the perspective saying, given the issues in South Africa, how do I optimize my behavior? How do I direct the development of my business to be well suited to this environment. And interestingly, if you take that mindset and you apply it in the US, you would land up with a fundamentally different growth path for the business, because the environment of business over there also has warts and difficulties and choppy waters. The second thing is, in South Africa, we don't realize how resilience fit we are. We don't realize how we have an ability, when you focused on building the business and you invested in building the business, how we craft something from nothing. And we certainly, as a service to businesses, certainly our clients are growing, and they're growing on average at a 29.8% compound annual turnover growth rate. Wow. These are established businesses. It's happening in a negative sentiment, 0.08% GDP growth economy. And you have to ask the question, how and why? It's about right mindset and right action. And that's what I'm trying to get across in the book.
So that's amazing. I mean, I sense that in the book, even though it's quite it's a very authentic style of writing, first of all, and it's based on your own experiences, which you're threading through. But there's a positivity. I think there's a real sense of this opportunity that we South Africans, as obviously you're a global company, but I think I'm quite interested in the South African question, and we're a resourceful bunch, right? And I mean, as entrepreneurs, that's one thing. Lord knows we need to be, right?
Yeah, of course we have to be. But so let's put the question differently. Is there growth in a no-growth economy? Yeah. I'll tell you where we're seeing it. So firstly, if you decide to grow, you set yourself apart from 99.9% of other people. Because other people in business are turning around and saying, should we grow, should we invest, should we stay, should we go? And all those deliberations, which if you're responsible for being in that place, and you take a step back and say, actually, how long have I been doubting myself, or doubting what I should be doing, or contemplating what I ought to be doing, instead of making a call and acting either way? And what you'll find is that most people have gotten into a habit of complete procrastination around a decision to either invest or not, to stay or go, to grow or not. So in the first instance, decide, make a call. And either way, it might be wrong, it might be right, but make a call. Our clients have made that decision. That's why they're with us. The second thing is this. With right mind, you look at the sector you're in, and if 99.9% of your compatriots and fellow peers in the same sector are in that doubtful space, it gives you massive competitive advantage.
Wow, that's great.
Because you're going to eat their lunch.
Sure.
The third thing, a large part of our economy is dominated, because of history, by massive corporates. There are big four in every sector. Fred, I'm yet to see a corporate that has not been restructuring itself over the last 4 or 5 years. And what that means is that any initiatives, any strategies, any opportunities that were being pursued this month by the corporate are next month unlikely to ever reach the ground. And most of the small, medium businesses, that 20 to 200 million rand business that we work with, are eating very comfortably at the fringes of the corporate markets, completely unseen and unnoticed by their big corporate competitors.
Sure.
And that's where the growth is coming from.
It's quite exciting, actually, yeah. And I think it's to your point about decision making and actually make a call, make that step, go forward. It loops back to your original point about, your purpose and your identity, because once you have that, I suppose that yardstick, you can measure everything against that, and the decisions become easier when you know what it is that you're fighting for, what you're working towards. So, and I want to quickly just segue to the book itself. I mean, first of all, congratulations. I know how difficult it is to actually get a book and get it out there and write it.
It's a job of work and love.
Yes, yeah. And it has to be, right?
And full of self-doubt as well.
It exposes all kinds of mysterious self-questions, which I think is just amazing. And it's an important milestone to go through, which again, congratulations. And first of all, the name. So Sweat Scale Sell. That name has an interesting backstory in of itself. So
it does.
Share that.
It does.
With us.
So look, I wrote the book from a hotel room in New York, jet lagged.
Oh, wow.
At 3 a.m. in the morning, I couldn't sleep. I pulled up my laptop, and I have an obsessive compulsive trait in me, which has been quite actively moderated.
Okay.
And I started writing the book. I began with the capital letter, as one does a sentence.
Yeah.
And 3 days and 2 nights later, 70,000 words later, the sentence had a period, a full stop at the end.
Wow.
And I did that 2 years ago. And then I left it because I was too embarrassed to actually show it to anyone. I then got approached by a whole series of publishers, and they said, you should write a book, you need to write a book. I was being put under pressure by everyone to write a book. And I built up the courage to present my one sentence, selected a publisher, and then they put me to real work on it. We organized it, restructured it. I made it palatable, readable, digestible. I tried to take out, and I hope I succeeded in it, most of the business jargon that one would find in a business-related book.
That comes across very well.
And I dramatized it. And then we needed a name. And Fred, it wasn't easy because I was so close to it.
Sure.
And Bruce Whitfield, who I do a show with on radio every Thursday nights,
that's great, yeah.
got fed up with me, and he said, Pavlo needs help, and he crowdsourced a name.
Yeah.
We built it out on social media. We had 574 name suggestions.
Can you share with us some of the more interesting
ones? They were crazy.
Yeah.
Well, sorcery, the secret sauce.
Nice.
And
that's actually not bad. I mean,
there were some nice
cheesy,
words. There were lots of cheesy suggestions.
Yeah.
And eventually I borrowed from 3 people who I acknowledged at a recent book launch that we had. They had made contributions, sweat, scale, and truffles, because truffles has value. Scale and sail, sailing a ship.
I'm glad that you didn't go with the truffles, but I see where you're going with that. Yeah.
Blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
And then I thought about, well, what are the stories? And the stories are about the fact that you sweat in the beginning, and mostly it's a sweat. Then from there, if you get the sweat sorted and you understand why you do what you do and you know your purpose, you have to get building scale right. And I get frustrated around how people talk about scale, because they talk about it in glib terms. It is mechanical, it's engineering, it's structured, it's technical. And I thought to get that story across in a storytelling way would be interesting. And then finally, don't forget that at the end of the day, they're one of 2 options. And Fred, our entrepreneurs, our business builders have to succeed in a cell. And they've got to succeed with dignity, pride, and magnanimity behind it. For the simple reason that if we can show entrepreneurship as an exciting, viable career that carries big rewards to it, I think it bodes better for the future than positioning corporate life as a life for reward, or government life as a life for reward.
Yeah.
And the reason is, you and I are the truest investors as SMEs in any economy. We don't have shareholder money, other people's money. We've invested everything ourselves. We sacrifice family, we sacrifice health, we pay ourselves last. Surely those values need to be rewarded most. The sell has to happen.
Sure, I agree with you. It's an amazing thing. And again, you've got to build up that value. It needs to be a focus. It needs to be the thing that you create. And maybe you don't sell soon, but it's either that or die. And that's the option that I think you very early on in the book, you're saying, this is what you need to realize. These are the stakes that.
And don't make the mistakes. So let's say you make the glasses you're wearing. You're a frame designer. I can assure you 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line, you understand everything about frames. You understand trend. You understand fashion. You understand material science. You understand production, manufacturing. There'll be nothing, if anything, I can certainly show you, teach you, or introduce you to on frames. But you sell a business once. You don't have that same 30-year experience behind you to get it right at that point in time. And most people I have found, in terms of who we worked with and what I've seen, arrive at that point and say, gosh, I built the business. It's a beautiful business around frames, but I didn't build it for the bigger idea. And that is, of a day when it needs to be sold, it's sellable independently of me.
Yeah. So there's a lot of lessons in the book, right? And I think, it's and I love listening to the way you speak, because there's this clear passion that comes from your experience, and your experience includes having sold a few businesses, listed a few businesses, but you've also failed at business, and I mean, we've spoken a lot about success and the end goal being selling a business and so on. But what of the failures, and what lessons did you specifically learn? Let's end off with this. In terms of the things that you can advise our audience that the failures actually taught you, and what to avoid.
Listen, the failures are believing in a business plan.
Okay.
So write it up, research it, do what you need to do what you're told by the academic institutions, the banks, the funders. But know this, that the business plan is something that tells you what won't happen. The failures were around believing in the Excel model, where I could see I was a billionaire on Excel, before we'd struck the first dollar of revenue. The failures were about starting and not realizing that you're building every day, but simply running with the plan in mind. The failures were not asking why enough. Why did you buy from me, Fred? Why didn't you buy from me? And then asking why beyond that question. So the biggest failures emerged from having not gotten the positioning and purpose behind the businesses that were started right from the get-go, and building everything off a false foundation. Those were the biggest lessons I learned. The final thing on failure is it's guaranteed. In the book, I write about Malcolm Gladwell's commentary around 10,000 hours to give you insight and experience.
Sure.
I don't believe in the 10,000 hour rule. I believe in the 10,000 mistakes. They will happen, they're inevitable. And if you take very, very big bets in the many, many steps you take, you will burn and crash and not live to fight another day. Take lots of small steps so that when a step fails, it's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant, it might be a bit embarrassing, but tomorrow you're there again, taking the next step.
Yeah, sure. That's brilliant. And it sort of harks back to Edison. He speaks about all the mistakes that he made in order to get that one single...
To understand what worked.
Yeah, to understand what works. And I agree with that. That's great. And so you failed, but you've succeeded in greater measure. And really, congratulations on the work that you're doing. And we at Heavy Chef can only encourage you further. Long may it continue.
Thank you, and thank you very much for having me on your show.